In 2015, alongside President Shimon Peres, Dr. Mike Evans founded the Friends of Zion Museum in Jerusalem with the aim of combating anti-Semitism and educating people of all backgrounds about the heroic acts of Christians throughout history. His goal has been to activate through the institutions he runs a latent mass of Christian Zionist allies of Israel who can be the linchpin of efforts to roll back anti-Zionist sentiments, taking root in universities around the world. For Evans, the most critical objective today for the Christian Zionist movement is to recruit millions of people to fight alongside Israel in the forum of worldwide opinion and activism. After President Donald Trump declared his intention to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, Dr. Evans announced that he would give an award to all world leaders who moved their country's embassy to Jerusalem. It has so far been given to President Trump, President Morales of Guatemala, and the former president of Paraguay, Horacio Cartes. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Jerusalem's mayor-elect, Moshe Leon, and congratulations to Moshe Leon on his new win. And to Ronit Chassin Hochman, who will, together with Mayor-elect Leon, award Dr. Mike Evans this year's Lion of Jerusalem Award. Please. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mike Evans.
What an honor. What an honor to get the Lion Award from a lion. Your new mayor. You know, I've had a love affair with all of your mayors all the way back to Teddy Kollek. And when Teddy was the mayor, I worked closely with Menachem Begin. And one day I went to Teddy and I said to him, the Prime Minister has offered me some land to build a center on Zionism. He said, no, you're not getting it. I said, the Prime Minister, he said, he's not the Prime Minister of Jerusalem, I am. So I went back to Begin, I said, he says you're not the Prime Minister of Jerusalem. He is. He said, he's right, I'm not. What a wonderful honor and a privilege. And thank you, diplomats, Knesset ministers, ambassadors. I'm deeply humbled in behalf of our 52 million, yes, 52 million we have globally. And by the way, when I was with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, I told him we have 700,000 in your country. 17 million in the Muslim world. Yes, 17 million Jerusalem prayer team members in the Muslim world. Imagine it. So we're very grateful for all of the support and the amazing Jerusalem Post. I also want to recognize my dear friend, Jensen Franklin. Jensen is a pastor, but he's a pastor that has an amazingly big heart for the state of Israel and Jerusalem. Very generous. Jensen, would you stand? Next year, the Prime Minister will dedicate our $100 million Friends of Zion Heritage Center, because we're developing your first social network campus. The dilemma with diplomacy, that diplomacy without social network is ineffective, because 40% of the world operates off of smartphones. And so you have to have this dynamic working for you. Yes, we gave the president the Friends of Zion Award, and yes, we've given it to many world leaders, and we hosted the gala right here in the Waldorf for the embassy dedication. It's an amazing day we're living in. I, Jensen Franklin, served on a Trump Faith Initiative. We delivered 36% of the vote to give the largest in American history to the president. And I got news for you. Every one of us on the Faith Initiative is pro-Israel, 100%. There's one historic event that's taught me to think out of the box, to engage and ask questions, to create new strategies. It's what happened during the Cold War. When you think of the Cold War, you think of people like Sharansky. I delivered 1 million signatures to Ronald Reagan to try to get him out of prison. I'll remember what Reagan said to me. Smiling, I said, what are you going to do about communism? 1 billion lives are being infected by it. He smiled and he said in his soft voice, oh, I think I'll bankrupt it. He did. He did bankrupt it. In the last few months, I've been meeting with Muslim leaders. I spent 2 hours with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, with the Crown Prince of the Emirates, have many meetings with Sisi, many of the Muslim leaders. And the thing that I've noticed the most amazing is the dynamic that's uniting them in behalf of Israel. Oh, you see, we know what it is. It's 100% Iran. You're 100% wrong. It is Iran, but there's something else parallel with Iran that's just as paramount, the Muslim Brotherhood. Every one of them have a disdain for the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's on the equal footing with that. And by the way, speaking of the Muslim Brotherhood, they also have a big problem with the present Palestinian governance because they see them embedded with the Muslim Brotherhood. And I've heard that face to face. There's a shifting dynamic right now, thanks to President Donald Trump and Jared Kushner, that is pure genius. Genius. Winston Churchill said, the price of greatness is responsibility. Last week, your prime minister prevented a war in Gaza. It probably was the most courageous decision any prime minister in Israel's history has made. You would have had over 1,000 dead Palestinians. You would have had dead children. You would have had dead Israelis on a 30-day war. Sure, it would have played lovely to the base. It would have been easy for him to do that for political purposes. But what would he have lost? He would have lost a media war. He would have lost an ideological war. He would have lost an economic war. It would have been a cash cow for Hamas. And by the way, if you don't think media wars are important, think about what happened to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman by the media. The media branded him. I released a story in your Jerusalem Post weeks ago that the mission that he had was an Eichmann mission that gone bad. I told it to him face to face. I said, what you did, you sent them in to drug him like Eichmann, to bring him back on incitement charges. You overdosed him, he died, your guys panicked and screwed up. That's what I told him. And that's what I've heard from leaders throughout the Muslim world. I've heard that. As a matter of fact, the Turks won't release the tapes. They got the tapes when the Saudis came into the country before the embassy, which they reported that, but the Turks don't want to release the tapes. So media wars are damaging wars. But speaking of the dynamic I'm telling you, there's another thing with Gaza nobody understands. It's the Sunni alliance. How big is it? It's amazing. What Donald Trump did is amazing. But when I spent 2 hours with the Crown Prince, I briefed White House diplomats. I'm not saying their names, but you know them. They're household words. And when I briefed them on my meeting with him, because 1 hour was talking about Israel. And by the way, as I'm discussing Israel, he says to me, I know about the Jews and the Christians. How do you know so much about Jews and Christians? Because my father's house director was a Jew and a Christian. She was Ethiopian. And I grew up with this wonderful lady as a child. Amazing. I cannot discuss what he told me, but I can tell you this. If you knew it, you'd be astonished of where you are right now. It's absolutely amazing. I'm hearing things I've never heard before. But when I briefed the White House and I said, what you have right now in the Sunni world is astonishing. One of the diplomats said to me, what Bibi Netanyahu has accomplished in the Sunni world is astonishing. Now I know this firsthand because I'm talking face to face with them. And they're saying things to me. Thank Bibi for me. I work closely with Bibi. Another one said, I'm worried about Bibi because of the press he gets. Another one says to me, tell Bibi I'm coming to Jerusalem. What will Bibi Netanyahu's legacy be if he has time? If he has time. I believe it very well may be peace with 5 to 6 Sunni Gulf states. Yes. And I'm not saying that in theory, because I'm talking to these leaders and I'm hearing things that are absolutely astonishing. No one could imagine in the natural. When you look at perestroika and glasnost, you would have said there's no way. There's no way. This can't possibly ever happen. You're wrong. You're wrong. The Sunni alliance alone, not damaging it in Gaza, is worth it. Because you have no comprehension what they can do to stop terror. It has to be funded with money. You suck the oxygen out of it, they're dead. And they're not that impressed, by the way. There's people in this room that are much more sympathetic to the Palestinians than many of the Sunni leaders. I can't discuss the conversation, but I can tell you. Now, here's the greatness of this conference. The Post is a moral clarity paper. Amazing moral clarity. You have a prime minister who's a moral clarity prime minister. We have a president who's a moral clarity president. Don't underestimate the power of moral clarity. Now we have a mayor who's a moral clarity mayor. Don't underestimate the power of moral clarity. Let me give you an example what happens when you don't have moral clarity. I negotiated a prisoner release for an Egyptian American that was coming out. They were supposed to call me on the phone. I was supposed to hand the phone to another person. It was a done deal. The call didn't come. What happened to it? We're talking about weeks ago here in Jerusalem. A senator by the name of Leahy decided to suspend $500 million in aid to Egypt over what he called human rights. I told President Sisi, don't apologize for human rights. Fighting terrorism is a human right. You saved Egypt from the Muslim Brotherhood. We could have ended up with a Syria in Egypt with 100 million Egyptians. The war on terrorism would have been lost for 100 years. Don't apologize for human rights. I want to end it with one story. The president of France and I met Giscard d'Estaing, and he told me, Jimmy Carter came to me at Guadeloupe and told me he had a plan to install a cleric in Iran who was going to be wonderful for human rights. He said, I'm going to push the Shah out and put this wonderful cleric in by the name of Khomeini. Farah Pahlav, the wife of the Shah, told me on the Persian New Year, Jimmy Carter signed our guest book and said to my husband, you'll get no replacement parts for your helicopters or your plane unless you agree you have to release political prisoners, give freedom of religion and freedom of press, and let the cleric come back, Khomeini. The Shah turned to his wife and said this, if I do what Carter asks me to do, the Russians will invade Afghanistan. Iraq will go to war against us. There'll be an Islamic revolution in Iran, and who knows what horror will come upon the earth. God bless you, Jerusalem Post, for your moral clarity.